Blessed Samhain to all. So merry meet. Considered the Celtic or the Witches' New Year, this is a time when the veils between the worlds, between the land of the living and the land of the dead, are at their very thinnest. It's a time that we show our reverence and our honor for our ancestors and those who've crossed over the veils, especially in the past year. It's also a time to turn inward and begin reflecting on the internal work we're going to be doing during this darker half of the Wheel of the Year. So we're going to be talking all about Samhain traditions, activities, and the origins of this sabbat in tonight's episode. So merry meet, I'm Aislin. This is Ask Aislin, and I am here talking all about Samhain tonight. So welcome to those who are joining us. If you're here live, leave a heart anywhere in this video to make sure this gets into the feed of more people, or a thumbs up. You can do that in the replay as well. And if you are watching this back in replay, especially on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Body, Mind, Witchcraft, so that you don't miss any of our upcoming episodes. Now, if you are here live, you can leave questions and comments in the chat, and I will be answering all the questions at the end during the Q&A, and they don't have to be about Samhain specifically. And just saying hello to some who are joining us. Hi, Amy and Jen and Cindy. I see some people in the chat, so great to see you guys. So I am going to dive right in, and we're going to start by talking a little bit about Samhain's origins, where does it come from, and then we'll talk about what we can do to celebrate. So Samhain itself, the word, may be translated to summer's end in many translations. You may see other translations other places, but most of the time it's translated to summer's end. Now, it is considered the Celtic New Year, which is why many people will also call it the Witches' New Year. Now, something interesting about the Celts that many people don't understand or realize is the Celts actually only had 2 seasons. They did not celebrate this 4-season year like we do in modern times. Now, for the Celts, there was a cold season and there was a warm season. Now, the cold season began at Samhain and ended at Beltane. And then on the flip side of the wheel, the warm season began at Beltane and ended at Samhain. But what's very interesting is that in some places, the cold season didn't actually begin till closer to the winter solstice. So what that means is that in some areas, there was a space between Samhain and essentially Yule, which was considered not part of either season. It was considered a time outside of place and time. Now, this has led to some to say that that time between Samhain and Yule, even in modern times, is a time and a place outside of time and place and space and time. Now, we certainly know that the way the veils work, it's not like they just thin all of a sudden on October 31st to the 1st, and then all of a sudden they're thick again. We know that it is a gradual thinning and a gradual thickening. So the veils will begin to thin when we move from Mabon all through those 6 weeks that lead up to Samhain, and they continue to stay quite thin for several weeks around Samhain, and they really don't thicken until we get closer to Yule. So just something to think about. It's a gradual thinning and thickening, not something that's very immediate. So what this means, though, for us is that, like all the Sabbats, we really shouldn't think of it as just as one singular day. We should think of it really as more of a season, a seasonal celebration of this type of energy. Now, typically, Samhain in modern times is celebrated from the sundown of October 31st to sundown on November 1st. So in that traditional perspective, in some places, it's still Samhain, still traditional Samhain here in Los Angeles, because we're not at sundown yet. Those of you watching further east, the sun has set, and from that perspective, we've moved out of Samhain. But the other thing to think about is that Samhain is a cross-quarter day. That means that it moves every single year. Why that is because it's dependent on the fall equinox and the winter solstice. Now, since those 2 dates move slightly each year, Samhain does as well. So in 2023, astrological Samhain, or that exact midpoint between the other 2 Sabbats, is on 11/6 to 11/7. So what that means is if you have not celebrated Samhain yet, we're actually not even there. We're not even at the thinnest part of the veils yet. Okay, so We are going to talk all tonight about different things you can do to celebrate Samhain. So just know if you're watching this back in a couple of days or even in a week, you have not missed this. You can still take advantage of this energy. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about where do we as witches place Samhain in the Wheel of the Year? So Samhain, from the perspective of witches and Wiccans, is considered the third of the three harvest festivals. So starting at Lunaza, August 1st, around August 1st, this is the first of the harvest sabbats, and this is the harvest of the grain. And then when you move to Mabon, that takes place around the fall equinox, this is the harvest of fruit and gourds and things like that. And then once we get to Samhain, this is the third and the final harvest. The harvest of meat is actually what it was used for by our ancient ancestors. So in ancient times, the herd was often slaughtered right around Samhain because moving into the Celtic winter would have caused a lot of problems. It's too hard to keep all of the herd alive during that time. So the food that was needed to sustain the people during the winter was prepared right at Samhain. The Celts left food offerings to their wandering dead as well because they knew that the veils were thin at this time. Now, some believed that those who died any time during that previous year would actually wander kind of in this space between the living and the dead for the entire year until they reached Samhain. And for that reason, extra chairs were often placed at the tables around Samhain, just to make sure that there was none of the ancestors or those who had just crossed that were hanging around and were feeling excluded from the meals or needed to feel welcome at the table. Some actually carry on this tradition in modern times in the form of the dumb supper that we'll be talking about later when we talk about different activities you can do for Samhain. And if you've never done a dumb supper before, I recommend trying it. I'll give you all the instructions on how to do it in just a bit. Now, there's a lot of spirit activity. Those of us who are sensitive to spirits and energy know there's a lot of spirit activity during this time. You may notice, especially if you have cats, that they get a little crazy at this time, seeming to be chasing things that aren't really there. In our house, I know that the cats, our other cats that have crossed over in previous years, come visit us at this time, and our living cats who are here in the veil with us, in this side of the veil with us, can sense them as well, even if we can't see them. Now, because of all this spirit activity, the people of old would hollow out gourds to look like spirits to try to convince the spirits that were around them that they were being protected. And this led to that idea of carving the modern day pumpkin. So it's kind of twofold. In one way, you could think of it as scaring away the ghosts. Don't come near us, we're ghosts too. But also to just offer light as well that would kind of, if lights were put in the gourds or these pumpkins, to kind of light the way for those spirits who are trying to find their way across the veils to the other side. Now, people might also dress in white or costumes that were made up of hay to kind of, again, disguise themselves to not stick out on this night when all of these other spirits were traversing the earth. Today's Halloween costumes, as we know, are probably a far cry from what our ancestors and the original intention of dressing up at Samhain were. There were no sexy nurses and sexy pirates back then. So for better or worse, this is what costume wearing has transformed into. But typically these were costumes that were meant to disguise the living as members of the dead as well. Bonfires were also lit. The word actually comes from bone fires in some translations. The bones of those animals that were slaughtered right at Samhain were thrown into the fire in an effort to leave an offering. And it was thought that when this was done, it would bless the herd of the next year. Now, the Celts were not the only ones who knew that the veils were very thin at this time of the year and honored the dead. So Dia de los Muertos originated with the Aztecs as an actual month-long festival. The dead were honored through sacred rituals and sacred meals, and a similar festival can actually be traced to the Mayans as well. Now, when the conquistadors came with all of their slaughter of the indigenous peoples, The idea of these rituals and these festivals there was an attempt to kind of sweep them under the rug as all the people were converted to Catholicism, but many were not willing to part with their ways, right? With their very sacred rituals and festivals that were so dear to their hearts. So in an attempt to convert the indigenous peoples, the Catholics aligned their All Saints' Day and their All Souls' Day with the Aztec Festival of the Dead. And so today, our modern Dia de los Muertos is an amalgamation of the ancient festivals plus these Catholic origins. So the native people, like I said, they continued to just leave their offerings and their meals, these customary meals. And so today we see this in the building of altars, the leaving of food for those who've crossed over. I live in an area that very much celebrates Dia de los Muertos, and you could just drive by some of the cemeteries. You see people out gathered having meals with those who crossed. And in my little area here in LA, they had a whole festival on Saturday, and people built altars to honor their dead. And it's really great to see the community come together and celebrate in this way. Now, if we look at the Wheel of the Year myth from the perspective of witches and Wiccans, what we also know is that Samhain marks the death of the god. The god has returned fully to the underworld, and the goddess has followed him as well. She is also celebrated in her third form, the form of the crone, as she goes in after him. And so, for this reason, aging deities, and especially deities that are in their goddesses who are in their crone form, are especially worshipped at this time. So, the deity archetypes, if you work with deity and you wanted to call a deity during a Samhain ritual, which, again, by the way, can take place anytime in the next few weeks, you can look for gods and goddesses of the underworld to work with, gods and goddesses of death. The horned god is a very good one. Messenger gods and magician gods, sometimes people forget about them, but the messenger gods are actually the ones who have the easiest time passing through the veils. So for many reasons, they're considered psychopomps. And so they bring messages from the dead to the living. And actually help bring the dead and help them cross the veils as well. So specific deities you could work with, and this list is not exhaustive at all, but some deities you could work with would be the Morrigan, the Dagda, Cernunnos, a very good one, Hades, a lot of these gods from the underworld, Pluto, Persephone, any gods or goddesses that have that myth where they descend into the underworld at a certain time and then return at a different time. Hel, Osiris, Ereshkigal, who's the sister of Inanna. You could also celebrate with Inanna. Caradwen, Hecate, Odin, is just to name a few. So if you work with deities, you might consider calling one of those during your ritual. So let's transition into some activities for Samhain. And just saying hi to the others who are joining us. Hi, a lot of people have joined. Hi, Lynn and Melinda. Liz is here. Jenny, Tamra, Sabrina. Hi, everybody. So we are going to talk about some Samhain activities. So again, for anybody joining us later, just to let you know, Samhain is not over. You got plenty of time to celebrate. Astrological Samhain isn't even here until Monday to Tuesday. And then this energy carries further into the weeks as we lead into Yule. So the Dumb Supper is one activity that I highly recommend people try if you've never done it before. Our coven has done this many times. We haven't done this in the past few years. Well, we've done this many times in the past. So a dumb supper is when you prepare a traditional meal of any kind. So usually our maiden Beth would prepare some kind of a meal. So we set place settings for everyone, and you always leave at least one place setting for no one to sit at. So we leave the plate there, the bowls, the silverware, everything. And when the meal is served, that empty spot is also served. Now, the reason why this is called the dumb supper is because no one speaks during the meal. And this can be a little bit difficult. And when you first do it, it can be a little uncomfortable, right? We often will fill silence with talking, even if that talking has like no relevance or no meaning, right? But during this meal, the point is to be in, complete kind of alignment with anybody who's here, who's visiting us, who can't communicate with us through words. they are invited to this meal as well, and we remain silent as well. And so for what many people will do is they'll kind of, as they eat, for one thing, it gives you an ability to kind of really be mindful as you eat. And then the second perk of it is that it allows you to go internally and really feel any energy around you. Are there spirits that are visiting who are also having the meal with us? Perhaps contemplate our own mortality, or think about memories of our deceased, good memories that we had of them. So very, very reverent and moving ceremony. You don't have to have a big group to do it. We would typically do it with our coven, but you could literally do it by yourself. You could just set a plate for you and an empty plate and have the meal for you, and honoring and welcoming any ancestors or spirits who want to join you for that meal. And then additionally, if you have pets who have crossed over that you feel do visit around Samhain, leave some dishes out for them as well. It's a really nice and sweet idea to kind of offer that offering to the animal spirits and our animal guides and friends as well. So another thing that you can do during Samhain is a symbolic descent into the underworld. So Inanna's story works very perfectly for this. So a lot of people will actually work with Inanna at Samhain for this reason. She has a story where she descends down through the 7 gates through into the underworld. And in many ways, this is a story that symbolizes our own kind of descent down into the darkness of our unconscious to figure out what's there. But you can also use this as basically as a shadow work kind of exercise. And so what you can do is you can actually do like a reenactment of this if there's a lot of people. One year we actually did a reenactment of it, and we set up 7 little kind of stations where people would stop. In Inanna's story, she descends through those 7 gates, and we would ask, and in the actual story, if you don't know it, she was asked to take off something, remove a piece of clothing or a piece of jewelry every time that she reached a gate. And so what we would do is we'd tell people who are coming to the ritual, make sure that you wear enough things so that you can take stuff off. We weren't asking people to be fully naked at the end the way that Inanna is in her own story, but we would have people take off jewelry and take off, bracelets and things, a sweater, different things like that, and they would leave them at these stations until eventually they got to the end, which we would consider our underworld, and then we led them through a guided meditation where they met Inanna and kind of received messages from her and from the unconscious. So that's one way you can do it. You can actually do like a physical reenactment, but you can also Google this. You will find places online where people will lead you through a guided meditation of Inanna's descent. So if you're interested in that, look for that. And it's really, really great way to kind of tap into that more internal energy of Samhain. Another thing you could do is make a skull rattle doll. So I have brought a few of mine here tonight to show you. This is one of my favorite Samhain activities. It's great for kids and for adults alike. We really haven't had a lot of children who came to our Samhain rituals, so it was always adults making these, but you could absolutely do these with kids. So here is one that I made. I'll show you a couple of others. So very simple to do this. I get little skeleton dolls from the dollar store or 99-cent store. And these skeleton dolls usually have a head that pops off. And so you pop the head off of the doll or the little figure, and then there's a little hole there. And so what you do is you fill the skull with rice. I usually do rice because you want dry rice, because you want something that's going to make a rattle when she rattles like that. I don't know if you can hear that, but let's see if this one might. There, that one's very good. So that's the idea behind it. We want it to rattle like that. So you fill the head with rice, and then you're going to get like a dowel stick of some kind that you can get at a craft store. I think we even found these at the 99-cent store. And you stick the dowel up through that hole to close it off. And then from there, it's up to you how you want to decorate the doll. So we would put ribbons all around her, or I like to always put like a little veil over her head. You can use a glue gun to do all of this. You can wrap ribbon or cloth around the stick and do whatever you want. So here's one that's kind of in purple and orange. And here's another one I did a different year. And here's another one we did a different year. So it's just, like I said, a very fun activity. And then what you can do any other time, or if you want to place these on an altar or somewhere in the house as a decoration, you get a very thin vase and you stick this down in the vase and you can display these then as well. And then what you can do is during your Samhain ritual, or when you want to honor the dead, or like during a tolling of the bells ceremony or something, you can shake these during your ritual. And we know that sound is often very useful in drawing spirits to the area. So very fun activity. Again, if you have kids, I definitely recommend doing it, but they're fun for adults as well. Okay, so that is the skull rattle doll. Now, during the tolling of the bells ceremony, which I just mentioned, the tolling of the bells ceremony is a very reverent ceremony where you typically honor those who crossed over from last Samhain to this Samhain. And so these can be anybody, it can be people that you know, it can be pets that have crossed over, it can be celebrities, it can be people who you read about in the newspaper. I remember one Samhain, there was like this awful car accident near my house right around Samhain, and I was reading about it in the newspaper the days leading up to our ritual, and so I honored the people who had crossed over during that accident in the tolling of the bells ceremony. So what happens in the tolling of bells ceremony is you have this list. I usually tell people to make a list before you come, because sometimes when you're kind of on the spot, it's hard to remember everything that you want to say. So you kind of make a list of people that you'd like to honor. And then during the ceremony, you call out their name, and then a bell is rung. And that is kind of honoring them. And then we move to the next name, and we call out that name, and then the bell is rung. So you could do that in a group. You could do that alone as well. And if you're interested, I'll be telling you more about this at the very end, but we do have a Samhain ritual coming up on Saturday, an online ritual, and we are going to be doing a tolling of the bells during that. So we invite you to join, and we'll tell you more at the end about how you can join us. Another thing that you can do during Samhain is a ceremonial burning of New Year's resolutions. So some people tend to do that near Yule or closer to the end of kind of the Western calendar year, right? But because Samhain is the witches' New Year and the Celtic New Year, many people feel that this is the right time to do that. So you write basically resolutions and wishes on paper, and then you can burn them during your Samhain ritual, put them in the cauldron or in a bonfire if you built one, and that can be a really, really nice way to honor Samhain as well. Divination and scrying of any kind, spirit boards, anything that kind of helps you communicate with those who are on the other side, automatic writing, all of this very good during Samhain as well because of that thinness of the veils. And then, of course, building an ancestor altar is something I definitely recommend doing at least once. We do it every single year. Some of you may have seen our pictures that I posted earlier today of the altar we built last night. So we typically build one or two altars. Sometimes we separate one altar as animals that have crossed and one altar as our human ancestors. This year we made just one for everything. But you typically just place candles on it, mementos, pictures, things that meant something to that animal or to that human when they were living. And it's just a very reverent way to honor them. And what we usually do is we build it, and then we light a bunch of candles and burn some incense. And then we leave it up for several hours just to kind of have it there before we take it down. Now, if you are building, if you'd like to build like a main altar for Samhain, so some people like to have a main altar in their house or in their yard just to celebrate the energy of the season, you can place things on it that are symbolic of this time of the year. So like pumpkins, gourds, leaves and acorns, anything that kind of symbolizes fall, horns, feathers, like I said, plates of food, great for the Samhain offerings, crystal skulls, very good. I brought one here. We had this on the altar last night. In fact, we put this on every single altar that we ever make for our coven. The reason why is there's a very good book by Christopher Penczak that's called The Mighty Dead. And he talks very much about these ancestors that have crossed over. And some of these may actually be blood ancestors of ours, but a lot of them are just people, witches, who practiced witchcraft throughout the centuries and honoring like this league of the mighty dead. And so he talks about placing a crystal skull on the altar, which is essentially an invitation for them to come we're doing this ritual and we'd love to have you here. And so he even talks about leaving a kind of a place in the circle for the mighty dead to join us as well. So I highly recommend that book if you're interested in Christopher Penczak, for one. It's a great author, but if you're interested in learning more about how to work with ancestors, especially our witch ancestors, great book. But you can always get a crystal skull, put those on your altars. Colors typically for the altar cloth would be orange, red, black, or brown, like any of the fall or Halloween-like colors. Now, another thing that's very good during Samhain is shadow work. In my opinion, shadow work is always good, but it's especially aligned to this time of the year. So this is a time when people who are like never doing shadow work start to feel like maybe they should do it, or they just kind of feel maybe they don't even know what it is, but they kind of feel pulled inward to kind of do some internal work. Now, the days are shorter, the nights are longer. It just naturally pulls us inward and lends itself to that shadow work. If you are interested in shadow work, I am going to be doing an episode next week on shadow work because we'll be approaching the dark moon. I'm going to be sharing some kind of new tips that I haven't really shared before during that episode. But if you really want to learn about shadow work, I have a lot of episodes on our Body, Mind, Witchcraft YouTube, including full-length classes on shadow work. So go find Body, Mind, Witchcraft YouTube. You'll be able to get some nice information on shadow work. Now, briefly, shadow work is an alchemical process, basically, where we dive deep into the unconscious, trying to figure out what's there so we can process and integrate what we find in the unconscious. And until we do that, much of what is going on is very out of our control. We're reacting to things, but we're not fully aware of why we are. When we do our shadow work, we begin to understand where the reactions come from. And it doesn't mean that they go away completely, but I will say they go away a lot. But what does happen is that we gain control, because then when we begin to react, we understand exactly why we're doing it, and we have the choice as to whether or not we will. Carl Jung is called the godfather of shadow work by many people. Now, he said the shadow personifies everything that the subject refuses to acknowledge about himself and represents a tight passage, a narrow door, whose painful constriction no one is spared, who goes down to the deep well. So it sounds very ominous, but it's really about, it can be painful, it can bring a lot up, but those who do shadow work regularly will tell you that it is alchemical, it frees you up so much, and just kind of unfetters you from the things that kind of pull you down. Jung also said, though, because of that, he said you really shouldn't fear the descent into the underworld or the unconscious. Like I said, it's tough. It's often painful for us to acknowledge the things that are down in the unconscious, those darker aspects of ourselves. But when we do that, we free up energy for other things like our spiritual evolution and our spiritual development. Now, in my opinion, the work must be done one way or another. So it has to either be done here, or it's going to have to be done in the next life, or that space in between lives. And for me, I feel like, why wait to do it? Why not do it now? Because you'll make your life better here on this side of the veils, and you'll also make your experience when you cross through much easier as well. Because what happens is most people do not do this work before they die. And when we die, and they repress their shadow, and they keep all that stuff down in the unconscious, all that murky stuff, right? And they can see everybody else's darkness and shadows, but they can't see their own. And when we die, the mask that was hiding basically our true self, we were hiding behind, that mask falls off, it shatters, and we're faced by who we truly are on the other side. And for many people, that can be startling. And so the more work that we have done now in the land of the living, the easier this transition becomes. And, for those who've denied the shadow and never really worked through it at all, this may be where that idea of purgatory or kind of that limbo comes from, because there's sort of this space where that work needs to get done. So my advice is do your shadow work now, and it's the perfect time, because we're entering the darker half of the wheel, and Samhain's the perfect time to start. So what you can do, there's a lot of ways to work with shadow work. You can, like I said, we've got videos on our Body, Mind, Witchcraft YouTube channel. We're going to be doing an episode. I'm going to be doing an episode next week with some shadow work tips. At the end, I'll tell you a little bit about our Shadow Seekers group, which is going to be opening in 3 weeks. And that could be an option for those who want to dive a little deeper with their shadow work. You can contemplate your own inner darkness through journaling. You can Google shadow work prompts and see what comes up. If you are in our Body Mind Witchcraft Facebook group, we have prompts every week. We have different prompts for people to work with. You can contemplate your triggers by removing the other person. So anything that kind of happens in the outside world, some kind of a disagreement with a person, see if you can remove that person and just see what it's bringing up for you internally. What do the triggers say about you? It doesn't say anything bad. It just points to things that you could work on. So I'm going to open it up now for the Q&A, and then at the end, I'm going to share with you a little bit more about the ritual that's coming up and about how you can join our Shadow Seekers group if you would like to. So if you are here with us live, please put some questions in the chat. It doesn't have to be about Samhain, it can be, but it can be about anything related to witchcraft, shadow work, energy work, etc. I do have a nice question here. I was sent by Aislin, so I'm going to start with this one, and then that gives you some time, if you're here live, to put the questions in. So Aislin is asking about candle magic. So she said she's very interested in candle magic and using incense or essential oils to set intentions and bring about change. So candle magic, in my opinion, is one of the most accessible forms of magic for anyone to try. It is really great because it can work with the intention of color. It can also work with all 4 elements. So if you kind of think about a candle when it burns, I'm going to share with you a few of my favorite types of candles to use. But when a candle burns, you have the wax that sort of represents the earth element. And then when it burns, it pools in the bottom as a liquid, right? So we have a liquid that can represent the water element. The fire itself is just simply the flame as we light it, and then the air element is the oxygen required to make the candle burn. Now, when you are doing candle magic, you can choose the color that you would like to set with your intention. So, if you don't really know anything about color magic, you can literally just start with white. That's totally fine. But if you study a little bit about the intentions of the different colors, many people will say, most of them are fairly intuitive. So like green and brown would typically be the colors of healing or health, energy. Red and pink, colors of love and passion. Blue, often a color of peace and calming. I also consider it a color of protection. Black is also a color of protection. Purple connects us to the divine and the spirit world outside of us. I like orange for justice. If you got anything that you're doing at court or anything that's legal like that, you could definitely. I always tell people to kind of use your own intuition when it comes to color. When you have an intention, whatever your intention is, pick a color that resonates with you. Now, because Aislin asked about herbs and incense, essential oils, they're very good when working with the candles. So you can actually anoint your candles with oils. And then one thing I like to do, so I'm going to show you these. I like to work with chime candles. Sometimes people call these spell candles. You can get them online in a big box of all different colors, and you can often find them at like witchy shops, though they're usually, the price is kind of jacked up, and you'll pay, because sometimes you could pay over $1 for each of these. You could usually get them on Amazon for a big box. Now, when you select the candle, what you could do is pick an oil that also works with your intention. Now, we could teach hours and hours and hours of oils and herbs and different things like that are connected to our intentions. I recommend picking up some really good correspondence books. I love Scott Cunningham when it comes to oils and herbs. So his book, Magical Aromatherapy, is very good for essential oils. So if you want to learn more about what oils are connected to what intentions and how to use them, I would pick up this book. And then he also has a bigger book, The Encyclopedia of Magical Herbs. This is a great book because it goes through all the different herbs, the different forms that they come in, how you can use them. At the end has a huge glossary of intentions. So you just literally go in and it says like health. You just look up health and it's going to list all the herbs that are good for that intention. So both books by Scott Cunningham, great for anybody's witchy library. So what you would do if you were going to anoint the candle is you start in the middle typically, and then if you are going to work with drawing in energy, I would usually start rubbing the oil into the candle, going clockwise and going all the way up to the wick, and then I would put some on the wick, and then I go back to the center and then continue clockwise rubbing the oil into the candle until I get down to the bottom. Now, if you were going to do a spell that was supposed to be releasing or banishing, you can just reverse the direction and do that counterclockwise. And then, now you can just burn it at that point. But what I also like to do is then pair it with some herbs. And I put some herbs. So you already got this like anointed with the oil. I put some herbs on a little piece of paper and then roll the candle along that paper, and it will coat this in those herbs. And then from there, you can hold the candle in your hands, set your intention, send your energy into it, and then burn it. Now, typically, what's great about these is they will burn down in around an hour, probably less if you have the oils and the herbs on it, because they're like a catalyst. They're going to make it go faster. It's great because in under an hour, this is done, and then the energy of the spell is released out into the universe. Other candles you can use, though, are like these big ones. I like to use these, and I set intentions for the month, and then I burn a little bit each night until we're all the way down at the end. And on the next I start on the new moon, and then on the next new moon, I'll be all the way at the bottom. I burn it all the way to the bottom, and then I start over with a new intention on the next new moon. So these candles are really great as well. If you have specific intentions, like here's like a little kitty candle. So if you want to do a spell for your cat, you can do these. You can also get these shaped as people or different things for different intentions. And then just one word I wanted to say is that when it comes to like the chime candles, you'll probably just be able to leave them burn out. Just be careful. If you have to leave it unattended, I usually put it in the shower stall and shut the door or something. But if you do blow it out, like for example, these that I might use over a full month, I find it's best not to blow out candles. And here's my reasoning. We're using a different element. We're using air, the element of air, to put out the element of fire. And it from the perspective of the fire elementals, it can be a bit offensive. And this has always just been my preference. I'm sure I picked it up in books over the years, but I just wanted to tell you a story about a friend of mine who is in our coven, and she was doing some work with a group nearby, and they were doing some kind of I don't know if it was a candle magic workshop they were doing or something, but they were anointing candles. They were working with their candles, and at the end, the woman who was leading everything, she came along and blew the candle out. And my friend was kind of like, and then everybody else in the group too was a little bit taken aback. So it's clearly a thread that runs through witchy communities that we just don't really burn out candles. So to me, it's better to snuff them out. I put like a bowl, or you can actually get a real snuffer and make it look more ceremonious when you do it. But typically, I don't blow candles out. So anyway, I hope that helps in your investigation of candle magic and using essential oils and herbs. But Eileen, you can always get a hold of me if you wanted to add any follow-up questions as well. All right, so I don't see anything in the chat, so I'm going to continue to talk about our ritual coming up and the Shadow Seekers membership. But if anybody is here, feel free to leave some comments if you got any questions. So our Samhain is coming up on Saturday, November 4th. So that's this Saturday. We always try to put our Samhain ritual a little bit closer to astrological Samhain, as close as we can get it. We wanted to do this on a weekend, though, to ensure that more people could come. So we're having ours on November 4th, Saturday. And we're going to be honoring Hecate in this ritual. We honored her last Samhain. We also honored her at Beltane. It seems to be a tradition we're starting. Her energy works really great at these 2 points of the wheel. Now, during this particular ritual, we are going to do a tolling of the bells, like I mentioned earlier. So if you come with us live, you'll be able to put the names of those who crossed over in the chat, or you can even, you'll be able to call them out during the ritual if you want, and we're going to honor everyone's dead who's crossed over in the past year. And then from there, we are going to have a guided meditation to journey with Akate to the crossroads, where she's the ruler of the crossroads. The crossroads is a place that we can go to for many reasons, but one reason is to find answers. So if you have questions about a path you're on, if you have a choice that you have to make, or a decision you have to make, it's a really great place to come to get insight into that. So I'm going to be guiding everyone to the crossroads, where we will receive messages about whatever is on our minds at that time. Now we are offering, so this ritual is through donation. You can get your ticket at Eventbrite. It will let you put a minimum of $1 in, and so that'll get you a ticket for just $1 if you'd like. And donations help us continue to put out these rituals. We put a lot of time into these rituals, and we always are so excited to share them with people, but the donations help make it possible for us to continue doing it. There's a lot of tech it takes to run all this, so below this video, you will find a link where you'll be able to get a ticket if you haven't gotten your ticket yet. And the ticket will also get you a replay. So everybody who gets an online ticket will also get the replay sent to them afterwards. And that way, if you can't come live, you've got the replay. Or if you want to go back and you want to do the meditation, you've got that replay as well. So we hope you will join us. And if anybody has any questions about the ritual, definitely reach out to me and I'll answer those. And it looks like I've got a couple of questions in the chat, so I'm going to go back here and answer a few. So I see Zabrina. She said, what would you offer to the ocean as an offering to thank you before you leave? She said she leaves here Saturday and would like to thank the ocean for the gift she's been given. Yeah, it's a great question. So, when it comes to offerings, especially an offering to like the ocean, for example, I would really first ask yourself with your own intuition, what seems like the right offering? But there's so many that you can give. Like I've offered the ocean roses, for example, fresh or dried. You can offer the ocean coins. I've sometimes done that. Herbs of any kind. You can just simply offer yourself. Sorry, I thought I was going to sneeze for a second. Allergies have been bad. You can also just offer your just yourself. You're being there and being reverent and in that energy of the ocean. Seashells, things like that would be a good offering. But at the very end of the day, I would kind of ask myself, what seems like the proper offering? Maybe even because you talked about a gift that you had been given by the ocean. Kind of think about that gift, like what seems to be the right thing to return. But when in doubt, I always feel like roses are very good for the ocean. They're connected to the water element anyway. So I hope that helps. And then I see Misty's joined us. Hi, Misty. And then Cindy says she's never been told about the color of candles. She heard that black candles are best for Samhain. Is that true? So black candles, very good for Samhain. I think that black candles connect us most to kind of the internal world. They're candles of protection. So one reason that people might burn them in the first place is that old idea of needing protection around Samhain. So kind of go back all the way to those ancient ancestors who were dressing up, right, in the costumes to kind of hide from the dead who were wandering about, or carving the gourds or things like that to kind of protect their houses. So in some ways, that's where the idea of black candles at Samhain comes from. But it is we're entering the darkest part of the wheel, as well. And so black connects us to the unconscious, and it connects us to, some might even say it makes it a little bit easier to cross through the veils. Now I will say is last night, we didn't have black candles. It's a little bit harder to find them sometimes. So we had burned white ones. That white is also very good for Samhain. But, other colors you could use at Samhain would be like orange, red, brown, any of those fall colors as well. Hope that helps. All right, so if there's any more questions, put them in. I'm going to just mention that since we did talk about shadow work tonight, that our Shadow Seekers Shadow Work and Energy Work membership is opening up in 3 weeks to take in our next round of members. We are doing some awesome work. We have some awesome people in the membership, and we got a lot of great things coming up. So we are offering a very special deal for Black Friday. We are hoping that those who've been on the fence about joining us will take the plunge this time, because it's a great time to be in the membership with us. So as we get closer, look for more information about that. And we are also going to be kicking off the week that we're open, taking in the new members. We're going to kick it off with a live workshop on Zoom. Free workshop. Everyone's invited. It's my workshop, Introduction to Shadow Work. If you've taken it before, you can come again. I teach a little bit different every time, but especially if you're somebody who doesn't know a lot about shadow work, this is a great workshop. Whether you decide to join the membership or not, it's a full class that will teach you how you can get started on shadow work right then and there. So just look for that in the future. That will be coming, and we will be literally opening up for Black Friday, but we'll kind of be opening a couple days earlier for anybody who's come to that workshop. You can get in first to make sure you secure your spot, because each round we do have a limited number of spots. All right, anybody else have any questions or comments? While I wait, I just mentioned too, again, so like I said in the beginning, if you haven't done anything for Samhain, don't feel that it's over. It's not. Astrological Samhain isn't even here until Monday and Tuesday. That's when the veils will actually be the thinnest. That's when I would do a lot of divination, because you're going to be at the absolute thinnest that they're going to be, and then they begin to thicken a little every day as we move past astrological Samhain. All right, I am going to sign off if there's no more comments, but I hope that you enjoyed tonight's ritual, or tonight's episode, and I hope to see you at the ritual on Saturday. And I think I may have forgotten to mention, those who are in Shadow Seekers, your tickets for the ritual are free, so no need to buy them. Anybody else, get your ticket by donation. You can follow the link below. All right, blessed be and happy Samhain.